Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? It works? Okay, right. Thank you. I'm a very tiny guy, like I'm not a warrior, right? You're just scared of the Romans here. Like you were the barbarians using a haka because you're multicultural Germans these days. So I'm a tiny guy because I'm a philosopher. And philosophers are not warriors. At least, well, they are in their heads, but not in their bodies. So but I'm a philosopher. And the philosopher essentially, this is the guy who is the furthest away from the tribe. So you go as far away as possible from society when you want to be a philosopher. And the reason why you go as far away as possible from the tribe is because you want to have the biggest possible perspective. That means if there's another guy behind me, you should talk to him instead because then he's the philosopher. So a philosopher is essentially a shaman who writes books. So now you get what I'm up to. So that's what I do. And that's why I'm here today, to talk to you guys and start a dialogue with you guys, because to me as a philosopher, the concept of being a man and the concept of being a father and the concept of being a son are, of course, incredibly interesting, because they're dead important for us as human beings. So what do we mean with these three different terms? And we're going to try to sort them out today, but without going into too many details about the different archetypes and personalities and the different types of men that we are, from executioners on one hand to hairdressers on the other. They're all men, believe me or not. So, we're going to go into the three fundamental archetypes of manhood. And they are the boy, the man, and the God. And they are very important to us because we orientate ourselves in our world using these three concepts. And we will also discover that when we fuck it up and we get into real trouble in history, it's because we mix up these three things. I will show you, for example, that when the boy starts playing God, that's when it gets really messy. Really, really messy. You had a guy like that in this country less than 50 years ago called Adolf Hitler. So there you go. So watch out for boys playing gods, always dangerous. The way we're going to do this through a method called tribal mapping. Now, why do we do tribal mapping now? Well, I think number one, we live in a very confused society right now. We're in the middle of a huge paradigm shift. We're going from an industrial age into the digital age, and digital is now taking over absolutely everything, even in Germany, believe me. You just lived the last guys to get it, right? Wi-Fi here is terrible, we know that, yeah. Digital will swallow absolutely everything because it is the fourth major revolution in human history. We're going to try to understand that, because why we also go tribal is that we really want to go deep. We really want to understand fundamentally what it means to be human and what it means to be a man. That means you can throw all the theories you've had so far, anything you've learned, out through the door because you don't need it any longer. We can go much deeper than we ever did before. But there's also a reason why I'm doing this with you guys, and that is that I'm the kind of guy who works with companies like Google. And Google are not only interested in getting data out of you to start manipulating and controlling your lives, which they are already, they're also interested in seeing what little smart guys like me can do with data. And the first thing I started to do as a social scientist, I'm a philosopher, when I started having access to data, is that I started to realize that a lot of the things in life that we thought we could never have an opinion about, we can really have a strong opinion about all of a sudden, because now we can try a lot of the ideas we had in the past and scientifically verify them just by throwing data in here. So the method we're going to use is that we're going to start with a really great tradition when it comes to understanding humans, and it's European, and it's called psychoanalysis. And psychoanalysis started here in German-speaking Europe in the 19th century with a guy called Sigmund Freud. He was later followed by another guy called Carl Jung. If you follow Jordan Peterson, an old friend of mine the last few years, he's basically started a revival of these guys. It's very important to understand what Freud and Jung say about what it means to be human. Then also following them in the 20th century, we had the golden age for psychoanalysis in France. And this is important because Jacques Lacan, the leading French psychoanalyst, really updated psychoanalysis and made it much more scientific. But it's also another major name that I use in my work, and that is a woman called Julia Kristeva. And why I use her is because I think it's very, very important to bring in female wisdom into the overall perspective. You will discover that in my work, I radically believe the original tribe had men and women as equals. And the reason for that, there was only one hierarchy in the original tribe. That was between older and younger. And the reason for that is that young guys have big muscles and they think they're really brilliant. And when they do the initiation ritual in the teens, they think they're going to conquer the world until an old woman walks up to the young guy and smacks him in the face and says, "You're nothing without me." Because without wisdom, you're nothing. You're dead if you walk into the jungle 200 meters if you're a young, cocky guy. And that is one of the problems in contemporary society. I, for example, questioned Me Too when that happened immensely in Scandinavia, because I saw the young girls who were 23 years old and narcissistic and Instagram accounts starting attacking everything wildly like a lynch mob without listening to older women. And the people who called me first when I started attacking Me Too were older women, not men. Because the older women said, these young girls are completely lost and confused. They don't listen to us and they don't understand what it means to be a woman. Be proud of yourself and have integrity. So this is very, very important to understand. But the division between older and younger is fundamental to us as human beings. And it has to do with wisdom. So we use psychoanalysis here. Number two, we go to the world of anthropology. Anthropology used to be done through archaeology, meaning that if I wanted to know what an original tribe was like, that would be a real hassle. Why? Because the original tribe was, number one, nomadic. And when people are on the move all the time, you can't go to a place and dig there and find out anything. Most nomads don't even have graves because they're too busy moving all the time. They just throw the corpses along and then they walk on. So you don't find any traces of them anywhere. Number two, we define the original tribe as prehistoric, which is ironic because it's certainly part of history. But prehistoric means they didn't leave anything behind. They didn't write. And we don't write anything, you don't leave any traces either. So the problem here is that when we go to classical anthropology, we're pretty much left with the idea that if archaeology can't find out what the original tribe was like, we couldn't know anything about it. And we firmly believe that until very recently. And the reason why that has changed is because we now have something called data. What does that mean? Well, we get data now daily from 8 billion people. You produce data all the time. Your own smartphone produces tons of data that is sent off to huge computer clouds, and they're stored forever. Please remember that. Digital has not even happened yet, but when it happens, it will be like a huge wall that will just roll out over mankind and remind us all that everything you have ever done and will ever do will from now on be remembered. It's a really nasty God. But that's what digital is. It remembers absolutely everything. But that also means that when we wrote this book, Digital Libido, when I met you guys at the European Men's Gathering last year, we hadn't published the book yet. It came out in October last year, but this book is called Digital Libido, Libido in the Digital Age, Sex, Power, and Violence in the Network Society. It's going to be very messy the next 50 to 100 years, and a lot of violence. That's what always happens with paradigm shifts. But what we did when we worked on this book was that me and my assistants went around the world and did anthropology as good as we could. So we would go to New Guinea, Botswana, Brazil. We researched 7 different tribes in Brazil and Peru. Northern Canada, so we could get data, the last possible data we can have from these tribes. Very often I would have to sit down with a guy in a t-shirt and jeans in Peru and interview him about his grandfather. Because we need to get all the data we can get from the last remaining nomadic tribes we can find on the planet. But then we take that data, and when we discover that we find a similar pattern in the Arctic and on the tundra and in the jungle, that's probably because it's universal, because then we're very close to the original tribe as it was. And then we take that data, and then we throw that data onto millions of modern Americans and Europeans and Asians. And when we then see patterns, all those patterns are revealing tribe. And the reason for this is that our history as human beings is about 150,000 years. Homo sapiens is about 150,000 years old. And what we call civilization only started in some parts of the world 3,000 years ago, in Germany about 1,000 years ago, in Sweden about 200 years ago. So most of the planet has never had civilization. This means that civilization has not affected us at all. We are social, biologically, deeply tribal beings. So we can find out what the original tribe was like. I'm not saying we should return to that life. Certainly it was a real hardship to live in that tribe. But if we can find out how the original tribe worked, we can find out how we operate as human beings. So we can find out what it means to be a man or a woman. I'll give an example of this. In about 20 years ago, a British sociologist called Roger Dunbar came up with the idea that there could be a Dunbar number. There could be probably a size that was universal for the size of the original tribe. And when we talk about the original tribe, we call it the sociant. So if you hear the word the sociant, this is a universal word now used in academics for the original tribe. We lived in this original tribe for most of these 150,000 years. Tribes were the same size. There was no development. There was no progress. The maximum population of Earth was about 3 million, because unless you start growing plants and taming animals, you cannot be more than 3 million on this planet. So we were 3 million nomads, walking around in different tribes, being at war with each other constantly. That's what the world looked like. So the question was, if Dunbar had this idea that there was a Dunbar number, we looked at it last year. We took data from 7 million people around the world, and then forced it through the data and discovered the exact Dunbar number, which is 157, universally. That means the average number of people you relate to is 157. So you take like 20 people together where you live, and the average number of people they will relate to emotionally, and remember faces of and names of and relate to emotionally, I mean real friends, are 157. You're incapable of handling more than that. Americans think that and call it Facebook friends, but it's just acquaintances. It's just people you happen to know in case you want to trade with them one day. It's not people you actually know, because Americans usually don't know anybody except themselves. They're individualists, so there you go. So we have the number. We can now do this. We now verify a lot of these hypotheses using this. Enough for the methodology, but now I want you to understand where I come from, what kind of work we do. So when we look at this large time span here, what kind of tribe do we find? What does the tribe look like? Well, it turns out we get the data in from like a single man or a single woman can be very different. But men and women as groups are actually more different. So we have populations. And it turns out that women, they orientate themselves through a smaller circuit that we call the inner circuit. And the inner circuit is densely populated. It's a women orientation. And it's focused on one person at the center, and that's the oldest woman of the tribe, and she's the matriarch. And people are terrified of her. There's a reason why young girls hate older women, because older women are always right. The best way to study matriarch is to sit down with midwives in hospitals, because all the doctors are terrified of the midwives, and to talk to brothel madams. They're really, really good at specifying how they get young girls to get in order and survive, right? So matriarchs are there. Margaret Thatcher is a perfect example of matriarch, by the way. She tried to save the British Empire, and she failed, and now we have Brexit, and England is falling apart, and I love it. Because I fucking hate English arrogance, right? So there you go. So we all do, don't we? Because we're Germanic, we're Northern European. So we have the inner circuit here. The inner circuit is fundamental. You have to understand that woman is fundamental to being human. And the storytelling in the inner circuit, it's concentrated on the mother and child relationship, and this relationship is what the Greeks called mythos, mythological storytelling. This is the story that the priests tell in the tribe between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the evening. We call it tabloid television in Germany today, so there you go. This is a storytelling that can be any story you like. It's the fairy tale. It can be any story you like, but it's being told for a very good reason. And that's the effect of the storytelling that's interesting here. So if you're telling a mythological story, it's the effect you're interested in. And the effect is always the same one. Tomorrow morning, the tribe has to be on the move. And everybody has to follow. That means you're being told that if you're behind the matriarch, the oldest woman who's walking last when the whole tribe moves, if you're behind her, you're dead. That's why older women are fierce and tough. Because if you're behind her, you're dead. That's why all the goddesses in all the religions are always chaos goddesses. And what's chaos is always feminine. So chaos is fundamentally feminine. But chaos is also fundamental. Everything starts with chaos. The womb is chaos. Now, this is the mythological storytelling in the inner circuit. The men are then located in the outer circuit, which is much wider. And they run around usually in gangs or bands. And that's where the hunting and the warfare and those things go on. And this is where 95% of the men, 95% of the women, 95% of the men are located in these two realms. They rarely meet. One of the problems with contemporary society is that we're forcing men and women to be together all the time. You know what that does to you? It makes you feminine, not the women masculine. Just remember that. Because you then locate yourself in the inner circle. It's called the modern urban environment. If you follow your girlfriend to girlfriend's dinner, you will come home from the dinner with less testosterone in your body, you'll be lousy in bed, you feel horrible about yourself, you probably take antidepressants the next day. Don't go to girlfriend's dinners. Get some fucking brothers, get some male friends together. In Sweden today, 90% of divorces between 25 and 35 years of age are initiated by the women. And the women who leave their husbands between 25 and 35 today, women, always complain about the same thing. My husband doesn't have any friends, he only has me. He's a fucking loser. I have tons of friends, 600 of them. And he just sits at home and waits for me. He's a boy. And I don't want to be his mother, I'm leaving him. This is now a mass phenomenon in Scandinavia today. You must understand that your life fundamentally starts with brothers and with other men and having strong social bonds with other men. That's what women expect from you. They don't go for a loner in the bar on a Friday night. They go for the guy who's popular with the other guys. Because they want protection and they want provision. And the guy who gets that is the guy who's the leader of the band. So we guys are supposed to be out in the outer circuit. Today that means you're an engineer, you're a business traveler, you're out there traveling, you're about in the world. And that also means you should not expect your father to sit there with you when you're a kid like your mother did. Because that's not what fathers do. If you've got a father who competes with a mother sitting at home and cuddling with you all day when you're a kid, that's a bad father. That's just a parody of motherhood. Tribal. So, in between these two, because these two camps are usually isolated from one another, they find it hard to communicate. So in these two tribes, we need some androgynous people. That's why I cherish gay people and lesbians, because we need them as go-betweens. That's why they're there. The number of gays and lesbians in every tribal population we study is about 5%. In Germany too. We need them. If you have gay brothers in this room, we cherish you. We need you guys because you get the women much better than the rest of us do. As any husband who has problems with his wife knows, because when you go and see couple therapists, the gay guy is totally superior to anybody else. He will sit there and laugh at both of you because he understands you both. That's the great thing with androgyny. We need it because we need the go-betweens. So for the outer circuit, the inner circuit to work maximally, we need the gays and the lesbians. Now you understand why tribal mapping includes everybody. People are here for a reason. Okay, at the very outskirts out here, we have another category, about 4% of the people that I belong to, the real weirdos. They're called the shamanic caste in our work, because they're called shaman in most cultures. These guys are very experimental and risk-taking, you know, and the women out there, these are the women that the other women hate. So if the women here in the inner circle go after a girl because she's dressing too sloppily and she has her high heel shoes and tons of makeup on and fucks all the guys and they hate her, it's because she's a whore and she belongs to the shamanic caste. Send her out into the forest, that's where she belongs. And that's where she's comfortable, with the other men who are out there and they're crazy. The executioners, the prostitutes, but also the original priests and monks and nuns, the medicine men, even the diplomats belong to the shamanic caste category. Leave them out there because they are the only peaceful connection the tribe has with other tribes. And they are absolutely fundamental at huge paradigm shifts like the one we have right now. Most of the time, you can just leave them in the forest and let them go crazy out there and cook their witches' brews and whatever they do. They're on drugs all the time, most of them. You know, these are people who are only awake at night, you know, and they usually live in harbors when they live in cities, so they're comfortable in those environments. They're called shamanic caste. They're also about 4% of the population. And we need them because they're the borderline to other tribes. Now let's go back into this tribe here. I told you about mythos already. Now here's the second form of storytelling, and that's the storytelling we do in the outer circuit in the mornings. And this is the storytelling that relates to the father and son. The father and son storytelling is the one we call logos. That's exactly why science and mathematics is often put in the masculine realm. Now this is the kind of storytelling that the priest does at 10 o'clock in the morning. And it's all about logic. It's very German. Because this is about hunting and warfare. You need to know where your brothers are. You need to know where the guns are. You need to know where the ammunition is. You need to know where you get food and drink. Because you're going to go out to fight a war, you're going to go out hunting. It takes patience to be here. Fathers train their sons to be patient, to sit and wait for 6 or 7 hours before, boom, suddenly everything happens. That is a masculine trait, to be patient, wait, and then be explosive when it all happens. Your hormones as a man are trained to do exactly that. That's why men are in this realm. The storytelling here is the logos one. Can you now understand how fucked up it is in our society we can't keep religion and science separate? And even worse, we can't keep science and fairy tales separate? Okay, there's a third story here to be told, and that is when finally these two groups get to meet. That's called pathos. Yeah, it's sexuality, the ritual. The big mistake we made here in the West, or in the Middle East and Europe, was that we separated the two. We should never have separated religion and sexuality. If you go to the East, and that's why I converted to Zoroastrianism myself, Zoroastrian tradition, Buddhist tradition, Taoist traditions, religion is always used as the way to contain sexuality. So the first thing we need to domesticate in the tribe, that the older people need to domesticate among the young, is their sex drive. Why? Because the sex drive and the willingness to live is the same thing. And you get that in German. My favorite German word is geil. This is a story of pathos. This is a story of man and woman. Or father and mother, if you like. That's pathos. That's a third story being told. This story is an arrangement. It's a theatrical arrangement, the sexual ritual. And that means that women love to get fucked and fucked properly, but they're always waiting for a sign for that to happen. And the sign in the tribe always comes from the older woman, the matriarch. She has the ultimate negotiating power here. Because she says that, yeah, I know all you guys with your little penises out there, you want to fuck my girls. But you don't get to fuck my girls unless you come into the tribe and you deliver the provision and the protection. If you don't come here and deliver provision and protection, you don't get to fuck my girls. Now live with that. Because I can always take my girls to another damn tribe and give them different last names than yours, right? That's her negotiating power. So the guys, because the guys really want to go through the ritual. You're horny. You want to put your penis inside a vagina. I don't know why, but we all do, okay? It's just a blind obsession we have. And it possesses us, and we can't get away from it. And this is negotiating power for the matriarch. So the matriarch essentially says, okay, now we're ready. We're at the time of the year when we can go through ritual. And this is precisely why girls, when they get together, they sit and have a glass of white wine, and their menstruation cycles tend to go into the same cycle. We can now explain why that is. It's because in the tribe, the most beneficial environment for the tribe is that all the girls get pregnant at the same time. The condition for that to happen is that the matriarch has a guarantee that 9 months after the ritual, we're going to be in damn paradise. You guys have to fix a safe damn valley, and it's going to be full of food, totally protected, and then my girls will give birth to the next generation. That is the negotiating power of the matriarch in the tribe. And that's exactly how women are either turned off and turned off and turned off, and when they're turned on, damn, they're turned on. That's why you need to learn Tantra, guys, because when the girls are turned on, they want to have sex for at least 6 hours, and they want to be fucked by at least 4 guys. That's precisely why they scream when you fuck them. You're not enough. They want more guys. That's female sexuality for you. It's incredibly powerful, right? And this all makes sense when you think about it. And here we go to the storytelling again, because then we have 2 different types of storytelling that we constantly mix up because we mistake one for the other. Now, what is the fundamental story told here in the inner circuit, where the women are and the young girls are who are pregnant and the young girls are who have given birth to children? What is the fundamental storytelling that they give in here? The return of the same. Everything is the same. Everything returns to the same point. It's always the story about the seasons. It's always the story about everything is the same. So if you do the same thing, you return to the same point. Now, we can check that with data too. All we need to do is take 100,000 women and 100,000 men and then check if they can remember calendars. Okay, women are terrific at remembering names and birthdays, and you guys are really lousy at it. The average woman remembers about 4 times as many names and birthdays as guys do, because they remember everything that's circular. They want seasons. They want this shoe this season. Next season, they want another shoe. It's basically the same shoe, except they want to shop twice, so you have to work harder. That's what they do. They love your credit cards. That's what they do. Otherwise, you don't get to fuck them. They're very clever. They're clever. They're smart as hell. You see the logic here? So their storytelling is the circular one. This is one type of storytelling. We always have the fundamental storytelling of everything returns to the same point. This is the fundamental story. This is a story you're told when you're born. This is the fundamental story of the tribe. This is the only story we have if you can't afford more than that. It's Hinduism more than anything. This is the fundamental story. Now, but the thing is though, if I then leave the fairy tale in the evening and I go out with the soldiers or the hunters in the morning and I'm going to teach them logos as a priest, I can't tell them that story any longer because it's not about the return to the same point all the time. Because you guys are just going to get lazy and lie down. You're not going to hunt. You're not going to go to war if I tell you that story. So what kind of story do I tell you then? I tell you the phallic story. I tell you the story about your penis. It points upwards, right? It's got a heart on. This is the story that guys like. It's a journey upwards towards something better and superior. And it's called phallic storytelling. This is tied to the logos. This is why guys are obsessed with making the world better than it was. This is why you are fundamentally disappointed with your fathers, because you should be. Because you should improve what they did. If you can't do better than your dad, then you're no good as a man. Then you're a woman. And you're just repeating the same thing. So guys dream. We dream. We have hopes and dreams. That's fundamental to the phallic. We have hopes and dreams. And of course, when we go to war, this is a dream about territorial expansion. Our tribe should get bigger. We should be more of us. There should be more girls. We should have more to eat. More stuff out there. This is the dream all guys have. If we don't have a dream, we go and kill ourselves. Because male purpose is tied to the phallic. Now you can see that with several religions that focus on the phallic, and with several religions that focus on the circular, actually we should understand both. There's no such thing as you either have polytheism, which is tied here, or monotheism, which is tied here. Every society has both. That's why you have saints in Catholicism, because you cannot talk to God directly if you're a woman. No, you talk to somebody indirectly. Then you have saints. That's how women love astrology and tarot cards. And you guys don't like that, so you guys could go for conspiracy theories instead. Conspiracy theories is the idiotic equivalent among men of astrology among women. So you're equally stupid, both genders. There you go. Okay? So the phallic is about a dream of something kind of improvement. Now the question is though, is this phallic story relevant or not? And this is where the whole thing with the boy and the man and the God comes into the picture. Because the phallic has very different aspects depending on whether it's a boy or a man or a God. What does this mean? Well, to start with, something dramatic happens in your life when you're 1 year old. You're 1 year old, exactly after about 12 months. This is where psychology, psychiatry, and psychoanalysis agree very strongly. Something dramatically happens to you when you're 1 year old. You spent the first 9 months of your existence in a morphine tent called a womb, and everything was fantastic. That's why you can't remember it, because you didn't have any problems to solve. Any damn drug addict out there is trying to return to the womb. That's why drug addicts are pathetic, because you were forced out of it after 9 months. That's called birth. Birth is so damn horrible, you can't remember it. Thank God for that. Nobody can remember their own birth, and that's the reason for that. After 9 months in a morphine tent, you're forced through this canal, this womb, that you one day going to love to get back into with your penis, right? You're forced out of it, right? You can't remember a thing from it, and that's the reason for that, because it was horrible. But suddenly you're born. But the problem when you're born is that the first thing you're programmed to do is to crawl up to your mother's tit. It's called mamilla in the world of psychoanalysis. And while your mother is now reminded that she's actually a separate entity from her baby, the baby is separate from her, she will do anything for the baby, but the baby is separate from her, you foolishly believe that you and mother are united again. So when you suck the tit in your mouth, you're united mother again, and you have no problems, nothing to worry about, you don't have to think. Okay, you stay there for a year. After about a year, two strange things happen. You probably get your first tooth in your mouth. And it's not that nice to suck the damn tit any longer, right? A tooth is in the way. And something else happens according to Freud. Dad walks by with a big penis. He's a man. And you see his big penis. And you go, wow. And then you look at your tiny little baby penis. And you go, I don't have that. Wait a second, mother wants that. She doesn't want me. She wants that. She wants that in her pussy. That gets inside the womb all the time. And I don't get in there because I have this little penis here. I hate that. I want that. It's called the Oedipus complex. The girls have equivalent called the Electra complex. They want it inside them, but their pussies are too small. So, the child then dreams about being a grown-up. Child starts dreaming about being a man or a woman, and the way the child does this is called imitation. It's beautiful. If you got a kid, you know exactly what the kids do. They imitate you all the time. They want to try and do exactly like dad does, right? They imitate everything he does because they want to be like him. So they have little toys and things, and they play that him, and they have toy guns and toy weapons because they want to be like dad when he's out there in the outer circuit and conquers the world. That's being a boy. Now, the problem with our culture is that in any tribe I've studied, they're very, very adamant that this phallic intrusion has to happen. Because what the father's body then represents is totally different from the mother's body. The mother's body represents where you come from. It represents your origin. It represents unconditional love. That's not what the father's body represents at all. The father's body represents what the grown-ups are up to. It represents your journey. It represents the phallic. It represents where you're going. Where you must go to become a fully grown-up man one day. So you don't want to be the boy, you want to be the grown-up man. For that to happen, there has to be a certain distance between you and your father. Fathers are distant. They're not close like mothers are. They don't sit there and hug you, and they don't give you a damn tit. The father's God in the world, and they provide for the tribe. And you might even be so damn lucky that your father sacrificed his own life for the whole tribe. And then you will get automatically respect from the whole tribe because you're his son the rest of your life. So you can be like him. That is what it means to be a father. That is the phallic. So fathers are at a distance. There's something you aspire to be, and you cannot aspire to be something that's close-knit to you all the time. So you must not mistake the mother from the father. And here comes the next thing, what phallic love is, what fatherly love is. The fatherly love first looks at reality and then looks at you. That means when you go up towards the father, you go up towards somebody who looks at your chances of maximizing your life in the world as it is. So you cannot come to your father and say, oh, I want to be this, I want to be this, I want to be this, because then the father tells you, well, that's not very realistic of you. Have you learned anything? Have you worked hard? Have you tried your best? Have you imitated me in other men? So you can one day be this grown-up man. Now, the problem with our contemporary society is that it's totally generated towards consumerism, and it's generated towards the welfare state. And the problem with the welfare state is that it's one huge tit that we put into the mouth of every damn human being. It infantilizes us completely. It turns into children. And so does consumerism. America is sick of it. I hear every time I come to America, they have an obesity epidemic. You don't have a fucking obesity epidemic. You have 40% of the population who refuse to grow up and stop eating. Grown-ups don't eat all the time. That's babies who suck tits. Stop eating hamburgers. Just stop eating. Grow up. Eat the food you need. Not eat all the time to compensate for the fact you don't have a mommy's tit in your mouth all the time. So we live in a very, very infantilized world. And I'll tell you what, the reason why we live in this infantilized world is that we did have a disaster between 1914 and 1945. And it ended up with two fake phalluses called Hitler and Stalin. And we're so terrified now of male leadership and masculinity in our culture. So after 1945, we've gone into a mode of totally celebrating some kind of pacifism, which is a way of castrating the masculine and castrating the energy of the hunter and the warrior. And we made the feminine into ideal, and we're now trying to foster our boys into becoming girls. That is a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be a boy. And you know what's going to happen with those boys when they grow up and their testosterone hits them? They're going to be terrorists. Because the Middle East went through exactly that. We talk about Islamism today. We have to understand that the Middle East and the oil economies fostered a lot of young men to be fed by the state, think Saudi Arabia, right? To be fed by the state, to get educated, but not have anywhere to go when they were 20 years old. And if you know one thing from history, is that we have a lot of 20-year-old men who have no purpose in their life. They build bombs. They go for any stupid conspiracy theory they can find. Because if they can't find the authentic phallus, the authentic leader, they go for the fake phallus. That's how desperate we are to find phallus. So we have to understand this fundamentally. So the phallic intrusion has to happen. It has to happen here. And we have to understand that the current crisis for masculinity in our culture is fundamentally a crisis of infantilization. We need to adultify society. We need to make it an ideal again to be a proper adult, to support yourself and to carry yourself, both for men and women. But the way to do that is not through individualism. You see, during these 3,000 years, we've gone through 3 paradigms in a very, very short time. And they're all due to communication technologies. We invented written language, we invented printed language, and now we invented interactive language. And why these are 3 revolutions is because each of them produces huge amounts of data compared to the previous paradigm. Where was the maximum amount of information you could store in a tribal society that was nomadic? Information is everything. Knowledge is everything. What was the maximum amount of information you could store before you could write anything? We only talked. In an old woman's head. The elderly had all the power. This is why we talk about gods here. Because God is what we aspire to when we're grown-ups. We aspire to transcend who we are. We aspire for something higher than we are. And we don't do that individually. It's not your own journey. It's a shared journey you do with your brothers. And you can do it in the marriage with your wife too, but you certainly do with your brothers, right? So in the original tribe, the information was stored inside your head. You memorized absolutely everything. It was the only way to store information. Meaning the older people who knew things had all the information. Suddenly we had written language. About 5,000 years ago, we developed written language. What happened then? We could store information outside of our own brains. So if you were a clever guy, you'd probably go to the old woman when she was about to die, and you would give her a cookie and a cup of coffee, and she would talk. Because older women talk when you give them a cookie and a cup of coffee, right? So you give her the cookie and a cup of coffee, and she would talk about her life and say, well, this is how you create a shield, and this is how you win a war, and this is how you get all the girls ready for the rituals so you can fuck them, and this is how you give birth to children. And everything you need to know, she would tell you, right? So she would tell you all that, and then she would die. And of course, everybody would grieve her when she died. They didn't care about dying babies, because there were tons of them all the time. They died all the time. No, they cared about dying elderly people, because they were totally dependent on the elderly people. The strongest tribe was the tribe that had the most elderly people in it. A bit like Germany today, right? Yeah. Tons of old people everywhere. So, now when I can store information outside of her brain and she dies, she's just a corpse. The information has been stored. I've written it down. So what happens is a huge revolution. A huge revolution happened because we can now store information outside our brains. We created the first permanent settlements in the world. And because we'd managed to domesticate our own sexuality and push it from the dick up into the head, so we wanted to live and conquer the world, we were ready now to not only domesticate ourselves and our sexuality, we could start domesticating plants, and we could start domesticating animals, and we created large-scale agriculture. And suddenly we also got a male-dominated world. We shouldn't talk about patriarchy in a negative way at all. We should retake the word patriarchy and also use the word matriarchy. Matriarchy is how women relate to each other in the inner circuit. Patriarchy is how men relate to each other in the outer circuit. They're beautiful words. Let's retake them. But the male dominance, the dominance of the outer circuit to the detriment of the tribe, when the inner circle was made small and we basically started locking up our women behind burqas and things, when we started doing that was in the Middle East, it was in the river valleys, and it was about 5,000 years ago. Not all cultures did that. I've proven in my work that the highland cultures of Iran and Peru and southern India kept the women strong, and they were much more sustainable because of it. But we inherited a tradition in Europe in the industrial age from the Middle East of the river valleys where physical power was made the dominant mode of production. And men are physically stronger than women, and they're also not involved in all the intrigues in the inner circuit. So we just turned them from soldiers and warriors into factory workers and farm workers. So this is essentially what we did over the last 5,000 years. But this was incredibly efficient and very economical. And Mesopotamia alone 4,000 years ago had half the world's population. We had enormous population increases. And because of that, the farming communities beat the shit out of the nomadic tribes, and the farming communities of the world took over the whole planet. And that's when we started growing towards the 8 billion people we are today. Now, another revolution that happened, it started here in Germany. In 1450, it's called the printing press. It's the same type of revolution. This is the book. How did I produce a book here in Germany in 1449? I had to go to a monastery, right? And I had to find a snobbish monk who was a handwriter. And I had to wait for hours in a queue before he finally would talk to me, because he was a handwriter. It was a very noble profession, right? And he would look through the book and go, well, that's a really difficult book by Jan Söderqvist, and lots of difficult words, and it's really thick. It's going to take me 2 years to write a copy of this book. The average cost of a book in 1449 was about 160,000 euros per book. And it took 2 years to produce. There weren't that many books around. No wonder all the books were sacred and holy. If something was in a book, it was obviously true, because books were so rare. That's why the church controlled mentality during that age. Anything that was written in the Bible and the Quran, you wouldn't doubt it. But the printing press came along, and the monks and nuns hated it. They demonstrated all across Europe. Okay, stop the printing press, it's killing our jobs. You recognize this, right? It's always been like that in history during the paradigm shift. In 1550, the average cost of producing a book had fallen to 30 cents, and it took me seconds to make it. There'd be a lot more books around, right? And because reading and writing and counting became widespread talents in our society, we in Europe in the 19th century, after the Napoleonic invasion of Germany and Napoleon's army as a model that we built on, we could conquer the planet. The European population exploded, we conquered and populated 3 further continents, and we basically ruled the world, simply because Europe was the first place in the world where we had the printing press used to full effect. Now, what's important here is that when all these revolutions happen, you suddenly need the shamanic caste. Why? Because they're the only ones that get it. Because they're outsiders. You are so involved in here that you don't understand what's going on. That's why it gets really bloody and messy when these revolutions happen. Before Napoleon conquered Europe, you had the French Revolution. You had social justice warriors, just like you do today, who chopped off the head of anybody who said the wrong word or used the wrong etiquette. Rousseau was big then, Rousseau is back today. That's a sign, a bad sign. It's a really bad sign that people talk about tonality and etiquette and about who speaks instead of what's being said. Because then they're mixing up the fairy tale with science, and fairy tales become the norm for everything. That's exactly what happened during the French Revolution, when just a simple rumor that you were on the wrong side of things meant you had your head chopped off. Same thing with Hitler and Stalin. They loved Rousseau. They love Rousseau, these dictators. The boys love Rousseau. Why? Because Rousseau says that we're all born like a blank slate, and we can dream about anything and become anything we like. Rousseau probably fathered about 11 children in his life. He put them all in hospital homes everywhere. He never saw his children at all because he hated his kids, because they were in the way of his huge narcissistic ego. Always watch out for the Rousseauians. They're terrible fathers. They do not care about the children. They don't care about the future. They care about tonality and etiquette, and they're everywhere today. They're everywhere today. They hate guys like me, right? So you go to the shamanic. What did the shamanic do? Okay, I'll just draw down here. Okay, say you got a river valley, and you got one tribe that settled here and create permanent settlement. So then the river flows here. You got another tribe that settled here, create another settlement. And you got another tribe that settled here. The problem was, a guy I work with, a Russian historian, Sergei Turchin, is also using data today, has proven that the first 1,000 years of agricultural society was the bloodiest period in human history. And the reason was very simple. The tribes were still tribes. They no other story about themselves than they were tribes. So they were sitting here listening to the fairy tale at night that everything is the same and you can dream about anything, and the mother and the child is the center of the universe, right? And then they're getting hungry. Maybe they were even starving. And then somebody came in and gave them a phallic story and said, we got to go down the river to the next settlement, the next tribe, and kill them all and steal all their food. Just like Vikings, right? So they would just go down the river and kill everybody here, and then drag everything back here. And hopefully find women and children that were still alive and not being killed by the other tribe. So there was bloodbaths along the rivers. Then the shamans stepped in. Because the shamans are the guys who sit at the very outskirts of this tribe, and they actually talk peacefully to the guys in the next tribe. Shamans are crazy. They cross borders all the time. They don't understand things like skin color and sexual orientation. They're nuts. That's why they work. So the shamans were walking in between the tribes, and they realized, we got to do something about this, because we actually don't kill each other the way the other guys do. So what do? They built the first ritual places in history. Cigarettes, towers. And the way they then did it was that one shaman here put on a robe, and when a shaman puts on a robe, he's called a priest. He puts on a dress to look flamboyant, so you guys will be impressed, right? And then he would walk up here, the stairs here, the shaman walk up here, and then another shaman from this tribe would walk up here along the cigarette. And what does a cigarette look like, so you guys like it? Looks like a fucking dick, because you're dick worshippers. That's what you are, dick worshippers, by the way. When you fuck a pussy, you're only fucking a decoration of your dick. Now you know what sexuality, how it operates. So. We love decorations, right? So the priest is the guy who walks in the robe, and he walks all the way up here, and then these two guys stand and speak to the two different communities. And the guy here, he says that, well, we are this tribe, and we have an ancestor called Isaac, okay? And then the guy says, well, we are this tribe here, and we go all the way back to a guy called Ismail, okay? Now we've sat together at the drawing board here. That's what I did in the military, sat at the drawing board. Of course, they put me there. So you put them at the drawing board, and they said, well, actually, we discovered that Isaac and Isaac and Ismail, they have the same original father, and his name is Abraham, meaning we have one God. So you guys, please stop killing each other. We have a religion that we share. We have a narrative that we share. And that's when they slowly stopped killing each other. And the next thing that happened, which is beautiful, is what the shamans did, was that when they had all these abundance of soldiers and hunters here in the tribes, who are now becoming redundant, they trained them to trade with each other. Trade is beautiful. Trade means that you tame the stupid soldiers to actually say, no, don't kill him, don't kill him, don't kill him. Take this corn here, and he's got some wheat over there, and then exchange the corn and the wheat, and he will not kill you. And you'll both survive. All right, I get it. Let's exchange corn and wheat. Yeah, and when to really establish this in Mexico, and by the way, you've got a beautiful daughter, and he's got a great son. We can get his son and your daughter together, and we can marry these two tribes together and create a clan. Marriage. Marriage is a beautiful thing, but it's not about romantic love, I tell you. Marriage is about solidifying and not killing your neighbor. That's what we did. And who does that? A priest. I marry you to be together the rest of your lives and beyond death or whatever. Boom. One family. Take the guy's name, and you, girl, you can go to him and demand that he provides and protects you. And if he doesn't give you his credit card, don't fuck him. You know? This is the beauty of the shamanic. This is where guys like I work today. Because I can tell you what, the ultimate challenge we have today, we have expanded human imagination for the last 5,000 years. And people are getting exhausted. They're getting very, very exhausted. I had a very, very serious, intense debate with the leader of the alt-right in Sweden 2 weeks ago. And went viral the next day. Over 100,000 guys looked at it the first 24 hours. And the reason I did was that I did honor him for his nationalism. Because if we don't build on the tribe, and if we then don't build on the clan, and if you don't build on the nation that we created in Europe, that Hegel from Germany created in the 1810s, he created the concept of the nation state, that people who speak the same language therefore have a shared history, meaning they should not kill each other. So if you speak German and you're Swiss or German, don't kill each other. Create a shared nation. So the idea of the nation was stretching the Dunbar number even further. Now you begin to realize what a really, really difficult challenge we have ahead of us. We're going to have to stretch the imagination from 157 people that people care about to 8 billion. It's the biggest challenge we ever had. And if we fail, we're probably going to blow ourselves up. We don't need a war between men and women right now. We have way more important things to take care of. We should start celebrating women and celebrating men for exactly how they are and that they collaborate beautifully and create a society together. But to do that, we as men have to go back and find out who we are, because the women will have to find out who they are. Feminism will go through all kinds of different revolutions over the next 30 years. I tell you, I'm sure the women will find out what it means to be feminine and strong, because that's what women should be, feminine and strong. They're not victims. They're strong and feminine. They will find out for themselves that's what they do. That's what women need to gather and figure that out, and they will. We need as men, we need to meet at places like Mansign, the European Men's Gathering, and get only men into the room, all kinds of men, the whole variety of man and manhood. And then together start having a dialogue about we can train our boys in to become men, and then again start dreaming about being gods. That's what we need to do. Because the boys read comic books, right? They read comic books about superheroes. But they're also getting fucked up right now, because we're also mixing these stories. The mythos is the story for the boy. And the mythos for the boy is the story about that he that one day can become a man. So he imitates fathers, not a father. I've never found a tribe with a father in it. I found tribes with fathers. It's always pluralis. It's always men. My father told me when I was a kid, I'm not your only father. You got mentors, you got your uncles, you got all these other men around you. I'm just one of your many fathers. And that's why I love him to bits, because he understood that fathers is pluralis. Great fathers do that. You can imitate all of them. One of them might be more like you than I am, and that's wonderful. And I do mentorships myself today instead of having my own kids. So that's beautiful. So that's what we need to do. But we need to keep the guy here. Now you understand that if you take a 4-year-old today and you put the internet into his lap, and he discovers pornography, you've thrown him right into a milieu where you should be as a grown-up man with your big penis with women. You think that's a good idea? No. You're destroying his childhood. Do you think you should throw him as a 4-year-old straight into the logos realm and expect of him that he behaves logically in everything he does? No, because then you give him a damn war game. And if you put a computer war game into the hands of your 4-year-old son, you fuck up his childhood. Those are the modern equivalents of the wrong storytelling. I don't think we can escape the fact that our sons will watch pornography and they will play war games. But we need to become aware of what we're actually doing with our sons. We put these things into their hands. We're ruining their childhood. Because the childhood should be this beautiful process where you imitate your father. And you know exactly when it's most beautiful. It's when your father teaches you how to ride a bicycle. And your father knows before you do you can actually ride the bicycle. But you're so insecure, you want your dad to hold the bicycle for you while you're riding it. And then suddenly it's go the bicycle and you don't notice it. And then you ride another 100 meters and then you fall over. And you turn around and scream at your dad saying, "You dropped the bicycle!" And your dad says, "Yeah, but you bicycled 100 meters without me. You can ride the bike now. You don't need me for that." That's fatherly love when it's most beautiful. Your father's already figured out you're ready for your next step. And you don't know it yet. And he teaches you can actually do it. And you look at him. It's exactly like you imitate your father. And you make a little mistake. And your father turns around. And he looks at you and says, "Oh, you did it differently from me." Yeah, I wasn't meant to do it differently. No, that's okay. You did it your way. That's you. You shouldn't copy me. You should imitate me. You just look at how I do things and then you do it your own way. That's your own personality. You're your own person. You're my son. You're not me. These processes need to work again. So once we start understanding this, we need to work from 2 different levels. One is that we need to take the boys away from the mother when they're 1 year old. We need to take all children away from the mother when they're 1 year old. They need to get away from the tit. They need to learn to hate for the first time in their lives. Because the one thing we loved the most in our life was our mother's tit. And suddenly we're so damned ashamed of sucking it that we start hating it. And we need to learn to hate things we shouldn't do. It's called abjection. This is female psychoanalysis, not male, female psychoanalysis. Because the mother has no capacity at all to drop her son. It is the father's job to lure, seduce the son away from the mother. Seduction is the most beautiful masculine thing that exists, the way generosity is the most beautiful feminine thing that exists. Seduction is something you need to work on as a father. You need to seduce your son and seduce your daughters. You seduce them into being grown-ups. This process has to work, but we also need to watch out now within current media landscape because we're completely mixed up boy and man in our society. When we're throwing pornography and war games at our sons, we're taking the boyhood out of them and throwing them into manhood way too early. But also we're keeping them with the women all the time. In Sweden right now, 95% of daycare centers have only female employees. That's not good for the sons. Even if it's inner circuit, they need to have men around them. Otherwise, they don't have role models. And how can they then aspire to become men? What is it that we aspire towards then? Well, we aspire towards the divine, the transcendent. We aspire towards improving our society, making it better. We aspire towards domesticating ourselves and our own forces and our own powers, and take the drive, the sex drive, the drive, libido, and put it also into our heads. And it's a very simple way of doing that. You can look at yourself, and either you're physically very reliant, so you have physical self-confidence, then start working on your mind. Or you're very mentally self-confident, then start working on your body. It doesn't mean you're going to be like the other men around you. If you have mental superiority, if you have physical superiority, it's probably because you got a personality trait, but that's good for the tribe. But by working on both of them, by having a dick between your legs and a dick in your head, you're a man. That's what a man is. And to understand this fully, it took me several years of deep research. I made a very common mistake. When I studied matriarchy, how women relate to each other, and patriarchy, men relate to each other, I thought they'd be symmetrical. There's no reason at all why they would be symmetrical. So how does the tribe move? Well, I told you the matriarch is the very end of it, and she pushes forward. What do you think the patriarchs are? At the front. They lead. The men lead the tribe into the future. That means they pull. That's why seduction is masculine. You seduce the tribe to come with you. That's what men do. And here's something very, very important we have to keep in mind. Whereas there's only one matriarch at the end, the oldest woman, she takes that role, there are two patriarchs at the front. Leadership among men is always twofold. And the reason for that is that we unite the two, we walk straight into disaster. This is why the priest and the chieftain are two different roles. The priest is usually the tiny guy who speaks the truth no matter what. Okay? Yeah, I was a coach. I was a coach in my basketball team at school. I was too tiny to play basketball, but I could certainly loudly scream at the guys. That was no problem at all. And I take all the guys I meet to martial arts, and they look at me and they say, "You'd die right away if you got up to the ring." Yeah, but I'm your biggest fan, right? The priest must not go into the physical realm in that sense. The chieftain is the other guy, and the chieftain is the physical superior guy. He's probably the first guy who fucks the most beautiful woman at the ritual too, because he wants his offspring to be the next generation that rules the world. That's a chieftain. Chieftain is the guy we look up to because he's stable, fatherly, but he also has a strong physical presence. Never mix these two guys. Because if you mix the priest, and if you mix him with the chieftain, you get the tyrant. You get a guy who's so full of himself that he soon starts listening to the surrounding world, and then he causes all havoc. If you want to avoid the tyrant to lead you, always separate the guy who's the physically superior guy from the mentally superior guy. And they should respect each other to be leaders. The priest should deeply respect the chieftain, and chieftain deeply respect the priest. The perfect story about this, the Exodus, the perfect story about this is from the Bible, and it's Moses and Aaron leading the people of the Hebrews to the promised land. And this is actually the original story about the nation in history. The first nation we know was the nation of Israel that left Egypt and walked to the promised land. And they were led by Moses and Aaron, a chieftain and a priest, and they were separate characters. That's exactly why that mission worked and why the people arrived in the promised land. Now, they were men. There was a priest and there was a chieftain. I told you if you unite the priest and chieftain into one character, you get the tyrant. Now, can you imagine how terrible it is if that tyrant hasn't gone through the phallic intrusion when he was a kid, and he's really mentally a boy, and he gets to be both chieftain and priest? That happened in Germany in 1933. And we need to start discussing that because that's happened before in history. It happened actually in Russia at the same time. When the problem started in Egypt 4,000 years ago. The Egyptians finally decided that we must not have pharaohs because the pharaoh is the idea that the priest and the chieftain is the same character. And it's terrible, especially if it's an 11-year-old. Because if an 11-year-old gets inherit both titles, he does one thing. He builds a damn pyramid. And what is a damn pyramid? It's nothing. It's the most worthless thing we ever invented. So I'll give you one more thing to think about, because I'm talking about hubris here. I'm talking about that we need to create a world where we need the machines to help us, to train people to love strangers on a level we've never seen before. We need to go into a world where 8 billion people need to trade with each other instead of going to war with each other. And for that to happen, we're going to need a lot of machine intelligence that actually fosters us the way priests and shamans always did, to love strangers as much as we possibly can. That's the ultimate challenge we live in. But we also have to understand the dangers that if we take our boyish fantasies and project them onto the future, we're going to be in a mess. And I'll give you a perfect example of hubris today. How many of you think that the American moon landing in 1969 was a success? Shame on you. It was a fucking disaster. We spent billions and billions of dollars to send 3 little boys off to a rock full of radiation. All of them went nuts afterwards, and nobody ever returned. No, my point is this. We have the ultimate challenge ever right now, and that is to save this damn planet. And that means the hubris in our time is to have any sort of fantasies that people who fucked up this planet to begin with can go to another planet and repeat the same mistake. We must stay here on this planet and be men and work out how we can love men from other cultures and together with them create a sustainable planet and avoid the next damn ice age. To create that planet, well, we as men don't go to war with each other. Women bitch, but at least don't kill each other, right? But we go to war and we kill each other. To avoid us killing ourselves, possibly being the only form of life and the only form of intelligence in the universe that we know of. To make that happen, to create that sustainable planet, a planet for 10 billion people who could live on this planet in peace, for that to happen, we have to go into the divine. We have to go back to religion, and we have to start dreaming again. And then we have to make the machines and train ourselves and educate our sons to become the men who can make that happen. That's the proper understanding of boy, man, and God in our age. But watch out. Watch out for any little boy out there who claims to be both a priest and a chieftain and being really immature. We need to get them out of the way as quickly as possible. Because if we follow the fake phallus like we did in 1933, it will be complete havoc. And we'll destroy it all. We only have one chance, and that is to find the authentic phallus, the messianic leaders who can lead us into the Exodus and into a sustainable planet. Now, that's the dream we should dream about. Now you see the whole pattern. Thank you so much.